consider joining us as a member. All right, then. Mo Rocca is a correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning, host of The Henry Ford's Innovation Nation, host and creator of the cooking channels My Grandmother's Ravioli. Mo began his career in TV as a writer and producer for the Emmy and Peabody Award-winning PBS children's series Wishbone. He has appeared on Comedy Central's The Daily Show with Jon Stewart and 4 seasons as a correspondent on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. He is the author of All the President's Pets, a historical novel about White House pets and their role in presidential decision-making. If only... Well, never mind. He's also a frequent panelist. I'm not even sure how to finish that joke, but we all knew what, yeah. He's also a frequent panelist on NPR's hit weekly quiz show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. Yeah. Steve Scher, meanwhile, is a podcaster, broadcaster, writer, interviewer, and teacher, the former host of KUOW's Weekday, and has taught interviewing at University of Washington since 2009. He's currently the chief correspondent of Town Hall's insider podcast, In the Moment. Mobituaries were the stuff of podcasts, too. That's until he compiled a stack of them into convenient book form entitled Mobituaries, Great Lives Worth Reliving. That book, in turn, has become the subject of tonight's talk. Please join me in welcoming Steve Scher and Mo Rocca.
You gotta bask in it. You have to bask in it. You're on TV, so you don't get to see all your fans.
I know and you did this all for me.
Yeah.
The renovation.
You can't even see the glass ceiling, can you, with all those lights on? But there's one up there. It's like Colbert. It's got your face in it.
Right. It's beautiful, boy. Really.
Yeah, it's a good space. It was a church.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that's a surprise.
Okay.
Yes, America builds monuments to intellectual endeavors. That's what this is. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to this. As I told you, long-time listener, first-time caller. I appreciate your work. I'm jumping right in. So, a mobituary is Mo Rocca's take on great lives, as you say, worth reliving. I just want to talk about a few right away, if I may.
Okay.
Because you have a few of these folks that I knew nothing about, and I am just astounded. The forgotten forerunner, Elizabeth Jennings, the Rosa Parks of New York.
So, I'm a big presidential history buff, but I'm particularly interested in the presidents that you can't remember were actually president. Usually the guys between Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt with all the facial hair. They're usually from Ohio. One of them was knocked off by an anarchist, another by an aggrieved office seeker. And I was reading a book of presidential trivia, and I came across a little factoid about Chester Alan Arthur, who was not from Ohio, but he did have incredible facial hair. He had these really amazing mutton chops. But it said that as a young man, he had represented, as a lawyer, a young African-American woman in 1854 who had been kicked off of a streetcar in New York City, and that with her, they successfully sued the city of New York, or the railroad company, and that led to the integration of transportation in New York City. And this was just like in 3 or 4 lines before it went on to say that, Warren Harding had the biggest feet of any president at 14 and a half, or something like that. So I thought, oh my God, and that date, 1854, and immediately I thought, wait a minute, Rosa Parks is 1955, so this is hauntingly and spine-tinglingly, almost exactly a century beforehand. And I sort of tucked that away. And when I started doing this project, which began as a podcast, I thought, well, this is a great story to tell. I want to know more. And it is just manifestly kind of amazing that this happened before the Civil War. And in telling that story, I look for sort of a central question, usually, to answer, whether it's a podcast episode or a chapter in the book. And in this case, it was, why don't we know her story? And it was a professor, actually at the University of Oregon, named Leslie Alexander, who theorized, and I buy it. She said, well, the North doesn't like to think it has anything to do with the South when it comes to race relations. Oh, am I going on too long? Is that what you looked?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure if anybody called me, I was going to be able to take the call.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh.
I just took it off ring, so when I was silent rather. So when it rang, I could get it.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll cut to the chase.
No, don't cut to the chase, because it's an amazing story.
It is a great story. And there you have it. So she, where were we?
Done.
Finish it for me. We'll do it like a Mad Lib. So
yeah, it can be like Mad Libs. All right. Yes, the North doesn't like to, be reminded that racism and slavery and bigotry is everywhere. You can talk about that in the episode. But so the woman gets on a whites-only car,
right?
And what happens to her? Just give me that little bit of a story.
So yeah, she gets on what's supposedly a whites-only. It's not official, it's not legal, but it's sort of generally understood to be a whites-only streetcar, horse-drawn streetcar, and she's going to church. She's going to go practice the organ, and it's in Lower Manhattan, and they say, the conductor objects to her being on there and says, you have to wait for a colored streetcar. There's one right behind, but it's full. So she says, I'm not going to get off. I have to get to church.
Yeah, I'm a respectable woman, and I'm an American. Are you, sir?
Right, exactly. And it's also kind of interesting because the conductor is an Irish immigrant. So there's an extra layer there, though, because she says, I'm a respectable American, I think she maybe says American-born, citizen, and so I'm not getting off of this. And so it's a back and forth, and eventually he enlists a police officer, and she thinks he's going to hear her case there, and he helps push her off of it, and really physically push her off and into the street.
Into the muck and the mire of that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very vivid. And so her father, who is a successful dry cleaner?
Her father, well, he's one of the very first African-American patent holders and holds a patent for an early form of dry cleaning. And so they're prominent, and they go to their church and they raise the money, and then they hire this future obscure president with mutton chops. But he's clean-shaven then.
And he wins.
And they win. They win in civil court, and it leads to every other railroad company. They're independent companies integrating.
I mean, it's just one of those stories that we don't hear about. All right, one other one of the forgotten folks, Moses Fleetwood Walker. You may notice a theme here. So who's Moses Fleetwood Walker? Professional baseball player. Yeah,
professional baseball player who, in Toledo, he plays for a team called the Toledo Blue Stockings. This is in the 19th century. It's 63 years before Jackie Robinson. So he really is the first black man to play in what passes for the major leagues. And MLB is starting to acknowledge that. And and Toledo acknowledges him. And I love that his name is Moses, because I do think that there's this pattern of people early on, these pockets of progress, and it's sort of like Moses beginning the journey and not making it there, and then somebody else much later is the Joshua and completes the journey.
Yeah, but also his presence is what in 1884 creates what?
Well, yeah, as somebody told me in Toledo, they said, for a color line to be broken, it has to be drawn in the first place. And that is so, and I had never thought about that. And that happens in the world of horse jockeys. It happens in the world of congressmen also, that we forget that there were these, with the black congressmen of Reconstruction right after the Civil War, that there are all these men, more than half of whom were former slaves, who are walking the halls of Congress. And then it's almost like it's Camelot, or maybe it's more like Brigadoon. I love musicals, but anyway, it just sort of disappears. It just disappears.
It comes back in 100 years.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that is such a great score, Lerner and Loewe. Oh, it's almost like being in love, right? This is my crowd.
A little later, we're singing together. Not you and me, but you and them.
Absolutely. We'll sing them all.
Okay, one more, and then we'll get to
Yeah.
why. And that's Ada. Where'd she go? Ada Lovelace. Am I saying her name right?
Yeah, Ada Lovelace is the daughter of Lord Byron,
Yeah.
and she's the first computer programmer. I mean, and I learned about this story because a show I host on Saturday mornings at the Henry Ford Museum out of Dearborn, Michigan, an amazing place if you've never been. They have artifacts from Ada Lovelace, and I'm so bad with algorithms. I mean, I tried defining one, and I had to do that in this book. But she works with a man named Charles Babbage, who creates an early form of a calculator. It's called a difference engine. I think I have that right. And she ends up essentially creating the first computer program, and it's based on. Oh, God, what is the stitching machine? I'm going to forget. Tell me now, Steve. Tell me.
It's for making carpet, weaving carpet, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. Well, what happens with her in the end?
In the end, I mean, she's not really acknowledged in her time, and she dies when
There's
she's
a
very
shock.
young.
A woman not acknowledged in her time for scientific
And
contributions.
she dies very young.
Yeah, very young.
Yeah.
Like Byron.
Right.
Like her dad. All right, so when you took this on, were you, how shocked were you?
Sorry, it's the Jacquard loom.
Oh, you see
Sorry,
that right.
that was the name of the stitching machine. I just wanted to get that out. Sorry. Thank you.
Did you keep all that stuff in there over
Well,
time?
no, but I'll tell you, the bad thing about Google, here's a name drop, but I was doing a story on Nora Ephron once, and somebody said, oh, who was the actress in that movie? And then everybody got on their machines, and she said, isn't it so sad? And she said, because remember what it used to be like? You'd say, who was the actress in that movie? And then people would go on to another discussion, and then somebody would then 20 minutes later go, Janet Gaynor! Or yell something, and then you'd realize who it was.
Like people who don't remember Nora Ephron.
Right, which is true.
Well, you've read about that. It's kind of sad, though. She hasn't been gone that long.
Yeah, 7 years, I think.
Okay, so when you started on this project, how shocked were you that so many people deserved a second look?
I don't know that I was shocked. More than anything, I guess. Well, I'm surprised. I'm surprised how quickly people are forgotten, even people that are still big names. They're remembered maybe only for a few things. I mean, I was drawn to the story of Marlene Dietrich because she's still remembered as a great screen star, but few people seem to remember that she was a fierce American patriot who renounced her German citizenship and really put her butt on the line, spending 18 months at the front in World War II.
And you had some people quoting that you talked to about what that was like to be on the front with Marlene Dietrich.
Yeah, well, I spoke to Marlene Dietrich's grandson, Peter Riva, and he said that he had spoken to Danny Thomas, and Danny Thomas, as a young comic, had gone with Marlene Dietrich to the front, and that Danny Thomas said to Peter Riva, your grandmother almost got us killed. We'd be in foxholes with howitzers firing overhead just so that she could perform for 5 servicemen. So she had this thing that's probably what helped make her a star, this intensity. Everything was 100%. And, you know, Hitler had sent his foreign minister, von Ribbentrop, to a hotel in Paris in 1937, to the Lancaster Hotel, to present her with a Mother's Cross that would have essentially made her Queen of Germany. So they had tried for a long time to lure her back, and she wouldn't do it. And she went full bore, and, you know, one can imagine if she had been captured, you know, the example she would have been made of.
Yeah, but she was tempted, you're right, to maybe go back.
Well, she had told Douglas Fairbanks Jr. that she wanted to seduce Hitler, And he said, well, you'll probably be subjected to a strip search if you seduce him in order to kill him. But her plan was to pierce him with a poisoned hairpin. And you know she would have done it.
So did you do this? You have a co-author for this one, Jonathan
Yep.
Greenberg.
Yep.
You have a slew of folks that look into the facts of these stories. Are there? Do you have a direction you're going with these obituaries? Do you have a thing that you want to follow, a thread? Because I mean, I could give you a thread.
I would love you to be my psychoanalyst and make it all make sense to me, because before I die, before I have to, I'd like to understand what what it is. Two things I can say. I'm interested, I will pursue people, subject matter that is genuinely interesting to me, because I've learned in my career, and I'm sure you have too, that if you're really interested in something and you execute it well, people will follow along. If you try to game the system and say, oh, this is what people will be interested in, you will be found out. It won't be interesting to people. And so there's that. And I also try to be generous with the past. I try to cut the past some slack. I think obituaries are the one kind of journalism left where it's okay to be generous, and I like to be generous. I think that there's a tendency in the culture to pick apart in a way that's not helpful, or to disqualify people. I think I talked recently for a CBS Sunday Morning piece with Doris Kearns Goodwin about this, and she said, you know, look at FDR. Yes, we can say he should have allowed more Jewish refugees in during the war. Yes, we can say that the internment of Japanese Americans is a horrible thing and a terrible stain. He also got us through World War II and the Great Depression. So I try and looking back, and you know, none of these are perfect people, but I think their stories are all valuable.
You live in the center of media power, and you're on the East Coast, so I bow to you on this. Is it really the case that you find people that fractured that they can't be forgiving of the other side these days?
Oh, well, I think I
know that sounds naive in a way, but I mean, is it really that bad?
I think maybe it is more on the coasts, maybe, or we're on a coast here, obviously, but
we are very tolerant on the West Coast, though.
What's that?
We're very tolerant on the West Coast.
Okay, yeah, you're much more tolerant. What can I say? I think that in different places, I think people probably are more on the defensive, or I don't know. I mean, but listen, and this has been people have been talking about this. I think President Obama brought it up the other day. I mean, I like messiness, and some of these characters are very messy, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, the idea of, here's my thesis for you. These are both people who are, or events, except for maybe Prussia, underdogs, underappreciated, but also people who were leading the charge before they had followers. People who were stepping out in front and doing things that were, not popular at the time, like Lovelace, like Moses, like her, like Randolph.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and I think I think that's true. The book has a series of forgotten forerunners. It also it includes Hadrian's Wall, so objects like that was the first Great Wall. I think I'm interested in people that also represent more than themselves, than the passing of themselves. For instance, Von Meter, the JFK impersonator, whose career died on November 22nd, 1963, and lived almost symbolically, significantly, another 40 years. I mean, being treated as if he was dead, shunned as a reminder of a horrible day. But that was a death of a kind of comedy also, a real gentle kind of comedy. I'm not saying we should go back to that kind of comedy, but a kind of comedy where he would ask permission to imitate the president, basically. And Jack Parr would say to the audience, I wasn't sure about this guy doing something so risque as to imitate a president. I mean, how that was a long time ago. But Sammy Davis Jr., I love Sammy Davis Jr., I think was underestimated in many ways. And that's a kind of entertainment that's gone. I mean, no wonder it's so hard to cast a biopic with him, you know, but a kind of almost earnest entertainment. It wasn't distancing. He never made fun of the material. You know, you can go on YouTube and you can see Sammy Davis Jr. singing the theme song to Chico and the Man, and you roll your eyes back, and then you listen, you go, oh my God, it's really good. I mean, he's that completely unironic, sly and funny, but not snarky.
Not snarky. Well, by the way, the Von Meter episode of the podcast, that's so heartfelt. That's so emotionally wrenching. And so is, by way of people who are maybe forgotten and need forgiveness, Billy Carter. That episode on Billy Carter, that is a great episode.
Well, thank you.
I give you props.
Thank you very much. I mean, Billy, you know, presidential families are like regular families on steroids in that I think we look at them and we see, oh, an odd sibling relationship between Billy and Jimmy Carter. Billy Carter, I was drawn to that because I grew up in the 70s, and I remember this buffoonish caricature of a person going on hee-haw, doing belly flop contests, making a spectacle of himself. And, of course, Billy Beer. And Dan Rather told me that even the dogs wouldn't drink Billy Beer. It was that bad. And it really was. And he, but I talked to President Jimmy Carter about him and to Billy's widow, Sybil, and the wonderful 6 kids. And they describe a man who was funny, who was really hardworking. This is verifiable. But when Jimmy Carter went into the White House, their family business went into a blind trust. Quaint, I know. And Billy had no choice but to make his living at being Billy Carter and, you know, playing the redneck. And, you know, and I actually posit that he helped his brother in the beginning because the brother, you know, the teetotaler, ramrod straight, Billy was a good old boy. You know, if Jimmy was that city on the hill, well, Billy was that dive bar that you need to hang out in once in a while to blow off some steam in that city on a hill. But then at the end, he consorted right with the Libyans. His brother, in the midst of a re-election campaign in his own party from Ted Kennedy with hostages in Iran, had to hold an hour-long news conference explaining to the world why his little brother was meddling in the Middle East. But then Billy, in the final proud chapter of his life, admitted that he was an alcoholic and went around the country talking to people who could relate to him about being an alcoholic. And he was a full human being and a very sympathetic one.
Yeah, and his kids and his wife, you talk to them at the end, they sound like great people.
Oh, I mean, it's a great family.
All right, let's talk about one other person from this book that you do a obituary for, Marcel Jack Rocca. He sounds like a great father to have.
Well, thank you. He was my father, and he was great. And I didn't set out to write about him in the book. And on Father's Day, this last Father's Day, I started writing about him. And my editor, Emily Graff, said you should make that a obituary. And I made it the dedication. And, you know, my father was a type of person who used the word delightful and used the word marvelous. He didn't like me using the word incredible. He'd say because incredible means can't be believed. But that TV show in the 70s, That's Incredible, ruined that word. Not a bad show, but anyway. But I found myself in writing this, and I know a shrink would have a lot to say about this, but I found myself thinking, would this delight him? Because I really liked to delight him. And I write about how my father, at the age of 50, started playing the trumpet, which is an act of great faith and optimism. It really is. I mean, and he was so disciplined about it. Every morning for half an hour, doing scales, working on his embouchure, you know, how you fit your lips around the mouthpiece. It's really hard. And every night, playing an hour of Dixieland jazz in the cellar of our house, of our split level, and I would put on metal roller skates that could stretch over my sneakers, and there was a pole in the basement, and if I sped past it fast enough, I could spin like I was doing a Salchow at the Innsbruck Winter Olympics to Basin Street Blues, which is a creative song choice, I know. And our dryer had crapped out in the 70s. So my mother would hate that I'm admitting this, but telling people this. But so the sheets and...
Well, it's in the book.
I know.
It's in the book, so she knows.
There you go. And so I would love to skate in between them. But yeah, so I found myself thinking a lot about him.
He sounds like a great guy, and all right, there's a lot more about him. But here, so I decided, so what are some Mobits if there was a Mobituary for you? And it starts with this one, I think. In 7th grade, your father would drive you to dance class at nearby Glen Echo Park. So you took ballet, jazz, and modern dance. Mm-hmm. You wanted to be a dancer?
Well,
I mean, I get the Salchows, but you also took classes.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of am a dancer at heart, I think. I like to dance.
Wait, have you been on Dancing with the Stars? Did I miss something?
No, I have not been on Dancing with the Stars, but I would take it very seriously, and I think I would do very well. I would take it. I know you're supposed to have fun with it, but
you got to work hard.
I could bear down. Everything else, I mean, no one would be able to contact me during those weeks because I would be so committed to winning that thing. That. I mean, foxtrot, the cha-cha, all of it. The Argentine tango with those ankle hooks. I love to sing and I love to dance, and I think everything I do is, and journalists that I work with, some might be uncomfortable with this, but I think it's all performative. And that's not to say that it's make-believe, because I think good acting is truthful. And I think when you're interviewing somebody, it is a scene, and if it's well done and it's engaging.
Now, you've done Broadway. You told me you did something at the 92nd Street Y just recently.
Yeah.
Have you done any, like on The Daily Show, on CBS Sunday Morning? Have you done singing or dancing in any of your reports? Because clearly an opportunity is...
Well, I sang a little... Nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina with David McCullough, and he's won 2 Pulitzers. So that's kind of special. I mean, I got him to sing. And yeah, have I sung in any of my pieces? Oh, I sang with Marilyn May. I sang My Best Girl from Maine with her. I did that for a piece. So this is going to be something I'm going to try to start creeping into more and more pieces.
Why not?
Why not? We all need, the world needs more singing and dancing.
You can freehand...
I love that I got an applause break on that.
Like I said, a little later, we'll have a sing-along. You can freehand a map of the lower 48.
Yes, I can freehand a map of the lower 48. And Alaska and Hawaii are easy.
A decent one.
Yeah, I can. I can do a decent one. I think where Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri come together, it gets very complicated. Like that right in there.
Oh, you're doing the states, too? You're doing it all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then when you get into Michigan, and then it's like, woo, Detroit is north of Canada, but then like Minnesota is way up, and it's it's very confusing. I mean, that part, it's tricky to get those 5 lakes right. And then there's a 6th lake. What's the one that's right by Detroit that's sort of like a mini Great Lake? St. Clair.
St. Clair?
Lake Clair. Thank you.
Clair.
Yeah. So that can get very, very difficult. But you know, cartography is my jam, as the kids say.
Is that true? Are you just making that up?
The kids don't say that, but I really do like it. I love.
No, I've heard they actually do.
Well,
Walking on the streets.
from a very early age, I memorized the capital of every country in the world. And when the Soviet Union fell apart, I had a nervous breakdown because.
Can you do them now?
What's that?
Can you do them now? Like
Yeah, I can do them
Georgia,
mostly,
Moldova? Can you do those?
Did you say the capital of Guava?
Yes, the capital of Georgia, Moldova. Do you have those capitals?
Oh, okay, yeah. So the capital of Moldova
I don't mean to put you
is
on Moldova.
the capital of Moldova is I'm sure is still Chisinau, right?
Oh, yes, of course.
And the capital of and the capital of Georgia is Atlanta. No, the capital of Georgia is Tbilisi. Yeah, but there's no capital like the capital of Suriname. I just love to say Paramaribo. It's like Paramaribo, da 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 Paramaribo. It scans really nicely.
Is this why you do the National Geographic quiz?
Yes.
Or?
I'm the host of the National Geographic Bee every year, and those kids are kind of amazing. No, what happened was when I was 23, look, I had learned early on, I loved the 1974 World Book Encyclopedia, so I memorized all the facts in brief in there for a long time. I was stuck in 1974. In the mid-'80s, I still thought we were in an energy crisis. So, I mean, I was... but then when I began working at Macy's at Herald Square in 1993, it was on commission. And don't ask me why, but a lot of people from the United Nations would come in to buy fragrances. I was a fragrance specialist at Macy's.
Well, what does that mean?
Got an ooh.
Yeah.
Well, I was not a spritzer. The spritzers are the male models in front of the counter, and I was behind the counter, so the male models were like the lure, and I would cast the reel out, and then hopefully they would attract someone, and I would reel them in, and then I'd give them the treatment and get them to buy either number 5, number 19, number 22, or Coco, and each one had like a different little catchphrase. Like Chanel number 19 was for the businesswoman who's still a woman. Chanel number 5 was if you wanted to smell like your French teacher, right? Because everybody's French teacher smelled like Chanel number 5. Chanel number 2 was what the Queen Mother wore. I'm not sure that that's a huge selling point anymore, but I was like, the Queen Mother wears this. And she'd be like, great, I'm 25. And Cristal was for like the tennis playing debutante. And then Coco was for the lady who was looking to get her groove back. I mean, she was ready to party.
Were you good at this?
Can't you tell?
Yeah,
Wouldn't you buy everything right now? And more than a couple of guys asked me if eau de toilette was literally toilet water. But anyway, diplomats from the UN would come in, and I found there's a lesson in this. Like I would say, are you from? I'd say, well, where are you from, sir? And they'd say, I'm from Burundi, and kind of a little distancing. And I'd say, oh, are you from Bujumbura? And then the person would say, how do you know so much about my country? And so like, oh, where are you from? I'm from Brunei. Oh, are you from Bandar Seri Begawan? How do you know so much about my kingdom? And so I learned that if you know one piece of information, people assume you know a lot more.
Was this?
I don't know anything in that book.
Was this before or after Harvard? You went to Harvard, right?
I did. Yes.
Hasty Pudding. Yeah.
I was Hasty Pudding Theatricals is a college theater troupe at Harvard, and I was in it all 4 years, and I was the president of it.
I mean, you performed humorous bits
in drag. Yes, so it's a drag. It's basically a drag show, and it's and it was fun. Pretty over the top. I mean, I can't remember any.
Oh, I'm sure it is. That's why.
Yes. No, I can't remember. I don't remember any of the bits. I'm not wearing the right clothes for them right now, but it was very, very fun. It was a great time.
You guys wrote it?
Well, yeah. It was,
by the way, guys, all guys.
Well, not any longer. But the cast members used to all be guys, and half would play men and half would play women. But they've changed that now, so now they're going to have women playing men and vice versa.
Yeah, but you wrote it all. You guys would sit down and write it all and then perform it.
Yeah. It was all student run, and then and it was a great experience because it was a pretty professional production to be putting on as an undergrad. So it was a very creative enterprise, and we would hire professionals to do some of the stuff some of the roles, but not on stage. But it was a wonderful organization. I loved it.
But you didn't do the Lampoon.
I did not. I got rejected from the Lampoon.
You got rejected?
Yeah.
They don't tell you?
They don't tell you why? I think they just. I think they just. They just don't call you. They're just you never hear from them. Yeah.
Well, their loss. Okay, you brag about, this was from the same essay, you brag about going to TGIFs in 5 continents.
It's just one of those things. I've been to a TGIFs in 5 continents.
What did you order?
What did I order? In the Paris TGIFs, I'm sure I had the French fries. In the Egyptian TGI Fridays, I'm sure I did not have liquor. And the Colombian TGI Fridays, I'm half Colombian, so I love the Bogota TGI Fridays. I highly recommend it. I've been to a bunch. I've been to one in Tokyo. I've been to one in North America. And I will admit that I tweeted about this, and it's really shameless, and I probably violated new standards even in my intent here. But I was kind of hoping that they would say, wow, come to our Australian TGI Friday so you can hit all 6 continents.
We'll pay for it. We'll fly
exactly.
you out.
Or maybe they'll let me do the groundbreaking ceremony for the Antarctica TGI Fridays, which with climate change is going to be here sooner than we think.
It's going to be very temperate. It'll be very nice.
Yeah.
Penguins. They'll serve penguins there. I'm sorry, I had to say it.
Penguins. They're the guano. That's penguin, right?
No, I thought that was, that's right. Penguins
that?
don't do guano. That's the...
Oh, bats only have guano. I thought penguins had their own guano.
They have their own.
They need to get some.
They need to get some. Okay, I just have to ask you about these few things, and then you guys are asking questions. But you've been around a while.
I have.
And I have a few questions. First of all, you did I Love the 80s.
I did.
And I Love the 90s.
Yes, I did. I love every decade. Yes.
What was the appeal? Besides
for the
a
audience?
paycheck.
The appeal for me was I probably needed a job at that moment. I was a shut-in as a child for much of it when I wasn't.
Wait, is that true?
Well, when I wasn't reading the 1974 World Book on my stomach, and I really feel bad for the kids today who don't have those big volumes because I cherish those. I watched a lot of TV. This is kind of sick, but at the age of 9, I memorized a TV guide. Granted, this is pre-cable, so it wasn't that big a deal. But I have 2 older brothers, and Mrs. Barnett across the street once said to my middle brother mentioned a younger brother, and she said, stop making stuff up. You don't have a younger brother, because I never went outside. So I had all this junk just in my skull. I mean, I don't know where my medulla oblongata is, but I feel like something was swelling from all the amount of just pop culture, just detritus from all those years that I would never trade for anything. And so those shows, which were kind of nostalgia programming on VH1, they were really fun to do. I mean, I was to purge all of that.
But it was fun. You liked it, or loved
sure.
it.
Yeah. Listen, those shows, not to be too heavy about it, but those shows were around 9/11. They aired like not long after that, and I had a lot of people come up to me and say, "This is exactly what I needed. I needed to basically crawl back in the womb, and this kind of nostalgia programming was just what I needed."
Well, that's great. I don't mean to compete with a professional essayist and humorist, but I also read TV guides, and the best TV guide entry that I still remember was a movie with Robert Preston and Alan Ladd. It was on in some Saturday afternoon. It was called Wild Harvest, the story of 2-fisted men who grow wheat.
And that was a TV movie? Wow.
It's a real movie. I've seen it since.
Wow. God, I hope they aired it during sweeps. I mean, that's...
Okay, and now...
Love Robert Preston.
Yeah, he's great.
Music Man. Yeah. Cash for the...
He's great. Okay, I know this is hard to answer, so I'm going to help you. Daily Show for 4 years. Was there a particular Oh, and now I lost my link. Was there a particular Daily Show episode that that stands out for you even today? Oh, here we go.
You know, it's funny. We're not far from it, but the one that maybe because we're in the Pacific Northwest, the one that's popping into my head is this wonderful, wonderful woman who had a Chihuahua, and she lived in Corvallis, Oregon. And the Chihuahua, she went to a drive-through at a Burger King, and she couldn't reach the window to pay, and the Chihuahua was in the passenger seat. So she had to get out to give the money, and she left it in drive. So the car, you can find this online, so the car, I don't remember what highway it was that runs north-south through there, not I-5, but
99, I bet.
maybe it was. The car left, she couldn't catch up. It managed to get across the highway into the parking lot on the other side, and it crashed into a Taco Bell. And the person at the Taco Bell looked out, one of the employees, and said, "Oh my God, there's a driverless car that's crashing." They went out and they looked in, and the Chihuahua was up on the steering wheel.
Hence the origin of the Chihuahua for Taco Bell.
They sent her because of this something like Taco Bell for the rest of her life or something that she totally deserved.
So I love these. You guys can't see this, but if you do a Mo Rocca, The Daily Show Google search for videos, there are a ton. And the changing look of Mo Rocca is pretty nice too.
Yeah.
And you were on The Daily Show from 98 to 2004?
2003.
2003?
Yeah.
How do you feel that you helped shape the kind of news that we now consume? If you do.
Boy, that's a great question. I mean, I certainly wouldn't say but I certainly think the show itself, I think probably had an influence on. I do know that when I was on it, that a lot of, mainstream journalists would talk about how much they wish they could do what we were doing, which was one part flattering and three parts unnerving, because it was sort of like, well, as just a citizen, I'd like you to like what you're doing and do it as well as you can. There was that. I would hope that the comedy, I don't want to take it too seriously. I mean, but I would hope that the comedy, made people, younger people who watched it, more skeptical without becoming cynical, which I don't think is healthy.
Do you think we run a line from The Daily Show and the work you were doing in The Daily Show up through John Oliver, or let's go Stephen Colbert to John Oliver, which is a comedy show, a news show that pays some homage to comedy.
I think what John Oliver is doing does feel new. It does feel new. It feels like, I think that there are real investigative journalists on that staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty extraordinary.
Did you like doing The Daily Show? Did it help shape your later CBS stuff?
Yes, I did like doing it. I didn't, after a while, the arch tone of it didn't. For 4 years, it was more than 4 years. It was a good and exciting thing and a great place to learn, but I needed to develop my own voice, and that's and I still am doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did a convention, a floor convention, right, for a correspondent on the floor for CBS and NBC.
Well, yeah, I've done them for both, and I did it for Larry King, which I loved.
That's right, you did it for Larry King. That's right.
I loved that. I had a great
Why?
time.
Why was that?
Because Larry King, I was thinking today of this album of Johnny Mercer, Bobby Darin songs, these crazy old novelty songs, and during commercial breaks, he would just, be singing, and I would know the lyrics too, and it was really fun. So, yeah.
During the breaks, you were on the floor, he was in the studio, and you guys were just crooning.
On the floor, the convention. I was his man on the floor. Yeah, it was.
Did you enjoy those?
Yeah, I did enjoy them. I mean, I think that the conventions. I mean, it may change again, but they are kind of just. They've obviously lost a lot of meaning. It used to be that conventions actually chose nominees, and that hasn't been the case for many elections.
Yeah, but even when you were down there, I mean, it was mostly fun and games. We knew who the nominees
I
were going
think
to
so,
be.
right? Wasn't the Democratic Convention in 1980? I mean, it was still significant, right? The speech that Ted Kennedy gave, but yeah, they do feel like vestigial structures. So.
Did you do 2004?
I did.
So 2004 was the speech that Obama gave, right?
It is. It was the speech that Obama gave.
Do you remember that? Were you on the floor for that?
I was on the floor for that, and I remember that was that was a great speech.
Yeah. Did you have to? Was that for NBC or was that
for
for Larry
CNN?
King?
For CNN, yeah.
So did they? I mean, because you were there in part to be a little
Comic
different
relief,
than the
sure,
correspondence.
yeah.
You were there to sort of give color commentary. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
So how did you react to that speech? Do you remember?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I remember there had been so much talk about then Senator Obama. Right, he was running. He was going to run for the Senate. I think he was a state rep. I think I may have that.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
It happened fast.
right. But I remember that there was a lot of talk, but there was. I was keeping track of so many things that I knew almost nothing about him before watching that speech and being very impressed by it. Sure, but I remember feeling a little embarrassed that I didn't know a lot about him before then.
Okay, I have two more things I want to address, but you guys probably have questions and comments and jokes that you want to make. So there's two mics. When the lights come on, line up. Remember, it's a question, not a speech. You know I will cut you off if I think you're going a little too far afield.
Seattle rules.
That's right. But I'll do it nicely. I'll be very passive about it. I am a bit of a media nerd, so CBS was like hallowed ground. When I was a little kid, I would record all the CBS radio commentaries of Daniel Shore and John Hart and those guys. And CBS Sunday Morning was the show that my mom and I and Dad would watch together. So what does that mean to be, if anything? I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. That's how I feel about it. How do you feel to be on that show?
Well, it's a legacy program, and it does matter because I run into people who will say, I grew up watching that show with my grandfather, and that means a lot to me. It really does, and it's different than any other show that I've ever worked on. It's a very special show. You know, Charles Kuralt, who I never got to meet, who was brilliant, who was like a lot of brilliant communicators, was so unlikely. If you saw a picture of him, you wouldn't think this person's going to punch through the screen and really talk to you. But there's a producer at the show that I work with named Mary Lou Teal who worked with him, and she said about Charles Kuralt that Charles Kuralt said, you know, it's okay to like the person you're interviewing. And I think that's, unless you're interviewing a war criminal, or somebody who's cheated the public of millions of dollars, I think that's for that show, that's a good operating principle, and I feel that way too. And for me, it's like going back to college and taking only electives, which I wish I did the first time around. I was the kid who liked the variety pack of cereals, not the big box. Like you got your Frosted Flakes, your Sugar Smacks, your Fruit Loops. It's variety. I like that, and CBS Sunday Morning is our executive producer, who's wonderful, and calls it a news variety show.
A news variety.
Yeah.
So Jane Pauley's the host now, right?
Yeah.
And do you have a hope, a goal for that show? Because you think about the people who have been on that show who have been in your shoes, trying to be the person who's bringing news, interesting variety of stories to the American people, right? Bill Geist,
Sure.
Kuralt. Charles Osgood, I know he was host, but he would do those sorts of things. Do you have a goal for yourself on that show?
I mean, right now, I'm just really enjoying dead people. I mean, I just think like they're just really easy to deal with. They don't have writers. They don't have publicists. Vis-a-vis the show, I don't. I love doing the pieces that I do on it. I don't have sort of a game plan.
Like you don't want to be the host someday.
I don't know about that. I don't know that would be the best use of what I do. But I do plan for running for office. Now I'm gonna plan on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys have questions? Come on up. You have to come to the mics if you have questions. I was supposed to be sure to say that. Because otherwise, you're just shouting and we don't hear you.
All right, I'm on. Oh, I'm on. Okay.
Uh-oh. Now you're really taking
No,
charge.
it's all good. I don't have to grip it. This is awesome. This has been so much fun having you here. And Upper Volta, Rhodesia, and Ceylon bid you a fond hello.
Well, did Upper Volta became Burkina Faso? Did it go back to Upper Volta?
No, it's still Burkina Faso.
It's still Burkina Faso, and it is Ouagadougou, right?
You're right.
Okay.
My question...
Now we're just making stuff up.
Yeah. Maps are fun. They never get old. Well, actually, they do, but they keep up. My question to you is this. Of all the jobs that you've had, what's one job that you've always wanted to throw your hat into the ring on, but you just either never had the occasion to do it, or maybe were not scared of doing it, but trepidatious about doing it?
Well, that's a great question. Being a stand-up comedian is, to me, the purest kind of comedy, and I mean, it's terrifying also. I don't know, and so I think, I should try that, but to try that, it's not just a dalliance. I mean, you really got to try it, but I can't tell. I once had a shrink, and we talked about this, that I can't tell if I would be doing it for counterphobic reasons. That's what he called it. He said, don't do something if it's just because it's something you're afraid of. So I can't tell. I need to, go into the woods and just... there was this great play on Broadway a couple of years ago, A Doll's House Part 2. It was like the continuation of the Ibsen play. And they say to Nora, she's been gone, for 20 years, and they say, "Where did you go?" And she said, "I went away, and for the first 6 months, I was trying to find out what I wanted in life, but I kept hearing voices in my head, other voices. And then another year, and there were fewer voices, but there were still voices. But only after a few years I could only hear myself. So maybe I need to go into the woods in Norway for a couple of years and find out if I really want to try stand-up rather than do it because it's something I'm afraid of."
Thank you for that. I'll bounce back and forth, sir.
Mo, I want to ask your advice. As I see you as a lifelong risk taker, and I'm trying to take a risk. I'm on a 30-year campaign as a lawyer and a pharmacist to hold Big Pharma accountable for causing brain damage to thousands of people. But
You're going to give a little political speech now, aren't you?
But as a political activist, a progressive liberal from the time I voted for Kennedy coming out of high school, I've followed...
You're going to give me a speech now. Turn it into a question.
It is a question.
I know, get there.
My question is, how can I help? I've got a plan to empower people to make a difference in the election by using my Pinocchio Don image that I borrowed money to have copyrighted and patented.
You still have not given me a question
and
yet.
My question is, how can I get people that you might be able to know to help me bring this campaign to make
you
a
want a
difference
publicity.
in the
He wants
election?
some publicity.
Okay. So you want I understand. You're a lawyer and you want to take on big pharma.
I've been doing that for 30 years.
You have been doing that, but you want to take it to the next level with the Pinocchio.
Well, this is the
turn it around and show everybody.
This is the sidelight campaign. This is the image of Pinocchio.
Now go back to the mic.
Pardon?
Go back to the mic.
This is the image that I had copyrighted of Pinocchio Don, and the shirt would sell for $19.95 with $10.
And
Hold
now-
on,
now
not
it's
for
an
me.
infomercial.
I get no
Okay.
money out of it. All of the $10 out of the $19.95
I appreciate what you're
would
doing,
go
but
to the
I'm
nonprofit
cutting you off.
of your choice.
I'm cutting you off. You got an answer?
Yeah, I think you just did it. This was being filmed.
Yes.
So,
You've done it. You've done it. Take it. You got to now take it to the next level. I appreciate it. But we're not having a speech on Big Pharma right now, unless, there is the votes.
Hi, Mo. I am a huge
I'm
fan
cutting you
of
off.
yours. I love CBS Sunday Morning. I tell everybody I know it's the best show on TV. But I also love Wait, Wait. And I would love to, I have two quick questions on Wait, Wait. Do you guys sometimes, and you may not be able to tell us this, sometimes know what some of the weird questions are going to be so you can prepare? Because all of you are so good at coming up with strange stories for answers. And I just want, and I don't know if I even want to know the answer to this because it might ruin it for me.
I don't want to know.
I want to help you through this.
Okay.
The question about wait, wait, don't tell me, right, is do we prepare ahead of time? So there's one section of the show called Bluff the Listener, and we do write our own bluffs, and it's not always easy to do. It's hard if you're assigned the real story, but basically you have to make up a story and fool the caller into thinking that yours is the right one. Really, you just want to be funny. But I have learned something very interesting on that show, that if you go in and you think, I've got the perfect joke and I know when I'm going to drop it and it will kill, it doesn't work. And I think it's because the audience has an unwritten contract with the show. And the understanding is you guys are funny people just kibitzing here, and the stuff that's, the reason it's funny is because it's coming up in the moment. And it's really interesting because you can't, I've come in, I've thought I've got this polished joke and it'll work. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. And it's sort of a relief also because it's an excuse not to prepare. But it's the only job that I've ever had that's both fun and easy. I have found in my life that fun things take work. That it's not, that you have to work at something to really enjoy it. This is the one thing where we just, like mouthy teens, just to get to be put on the panel, say what's on our mind, and the editor will clean it up for us.
Well, I am glad I asked because that's what I would have hoped was
Yeah.
the answer, so that's wonderful. And I was also just wondering what your very favorite part of Wait, Wait is.
Well, I think my favorite, the favorite part, I don't know. I think I find the top of the show, and the producers will say this also, a little tough. There's a lot of outrage. There's a lot of rage. There's a lot of outrage and great comedy. I think he finds a way to do that and keep it funny, but I think it's very challenging.
Yeah.
So my question is inspired by your interest in musicals and performing and singing. So if you could play any role in a musical, what would it be, and what scene would you want to act out?
Well, so I would like to be Hysterium in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which is the Jack Guilford role. I'd like that. I would love, I hope I'm not getting too old for it, but I'd like to be Seymour in Little Shop of Horrors. And my audition song that I would always use is, I love Ray Bolger. Just the idea of, not just the idea, the reality of him. So I would always sing If I Only Had a Brain, but that's obviously from a movie. Yeah, but those are the roles I think that I'd like to play.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I could see you as Hysterium. I mean, I see the other two too, but
Yeah.
that'd be fun. Funny thing
Yeah,
happened.
I think that would be great. Yeah, I'd like that. Yeah, I need to get back on the boards.
I would absolutely watch any musical you were in.
Thank you
and
so
I would
much.
be so
Thank
pleased.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I am a young person within this audience, certainly, and in general. And
Yeah, how did you get in here?
I snuck in, I'm sorry. I was too infatuated with my favorite, wait, don't tell me, commenter.
Thank you so much.
I had to
Thank
come in.
you.
So my friends and I and my entire generation are all very anxious all the time these days, and we're all convinced that the world is going to end within our lifetimes.
Yeah, I don't think it's just your generation. But
Well, yes, that's true. And you have a good sense, I think, of like patterns and trends within American history. Do you recognize things that are happening right now? Do things feel kind of familiar and you're like, we have seen some of this before and we might know where it goes? Or is this all like totally unprecedented and you're like, we're all scared and terrified?
I think, except for the part of the oceans overtaking us because of the rising tides, we'll be fine. No, I think I'm stealing this from a piece that hasn't. It was preempted because President Trump had a news conference a couple of Sunday mornings ago, although it may have aired here. But I think that if you're anxious about in the present, about the future, of the past is a place not to escape to, but as you acknowledged in the premise of your question, for context. And I asked Doris Kearns Goodwin this question, and she said, the end of the 20th century is the place to look, with the end of the Industrial Revolution, with so much disruption and the fear, for instance, that people wouldn't have jobs, that things were changing so rapidly. I think that's one place to go to, maybe for context. But, I did a piece on Herbert Hoover and how he was the great humanitarian before he became branded the guy who caused the Depression, which he didn't. And I talked to his great-granddaughter, and it was interesting. She just said in passing, she said, can you imagine being blamed for the second worst thing to happen in this country's history, after the Civil War? And it was just in that moment a reminder of the terrible things that have happened. So I think that I think reading about the past and spending time with these people is, again, not good for escape, but for context. Yeah. So, but I'll try to think of more.
I talked to a historian. He'll be here in a couple of weeks today. His name is H.W. Brands.
Oh, he's great.
And he just finished this book, which he'll be talking about in a couple of weeks, on the American West, Dreams of El Dorado. So it's a history of the West, but it's a history of America. And in, like, you were sort of like, look at the 20th century, he's looking in some ways at the end of the 19th century to see patterns and to see things unfolding, and they're very unnervingly useful information.
And I need to interject, I misspoke. I meant the end of the 19th century. Forgive me. With the end of the Industrial Revolution, forgive me, the end of the 19th century. Yeah.
And so there's another place to go for, to make you nervous. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrea from the capital of Idaho, and my question is...
Wait, what did you say, sorry?
I'm from the capital of Idaho.
Oh, from Boise?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. And your state flower is the orange pico lily. I also memorized state flowers.
And the mountain bluebird. Anyway, my question is, why does it take 15 minutes to make minute rice? And no, that's not my question. But I just want that answered someday. No, it's something you haven't brought up in this talk tonight, and it's something that actually means a lot to me. In the Wayback Machine, your blog on AOL.
Oh.
And you had the followers called the Rockettes. I was a Rockette.
Well, I'm so happy to meet you finally.
My name's Andrea, the funny nurse.
Thank you very much.
So I just wanted to ask, How annoying were we?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, what's the point of having a blog if you don't have groupies? I mean,
Monica's here tonight, too. So, all right. Well, thank you, sir.
thank you. Thank you.
When did you have this blog?
What's that?
When was this blog?
This was probably about 10 years ago. Listen, I'm like that character who sings "I'm Still Here" in Follies. I've done it all. So,
Thank you.
Good evening. So your book seems to be about people that were in the past unappreciated but had some value and interesting. Take that same look at your invention series. And are there inventions that were key? You know, everybody can get the high flyers, but things that were key, that were interesting and unappreciated, and maybe there's a book there too.
yeah, that's interesting. About inventions inventions that don't get the credit they deserved. I mean, there are definitely. I think there is a book there. I think there's also a book in the people who were right on the cusp. There's a guy, a French aviator named Louis Blériot, and it could be a great movie. I think Steve Carell should play him in the movie, who is this aviator and who just kept trying it around the time of the Wright brothers and kept crashing. And it's funny because he lived and he was never seriously injured. But the Henry Ford Museum has a little nook, devoted to Louis Blériot, and I just love people who keep trying. And so but I think that's a very good idea. I think it's a very good idea. Thank you. You know, one of the things I love doing about that show also is. I do kind of worry that the whole #fail thing, that's all over social media, like wielded like a cudgel. I'm so glad I didn't grow up with social media because I would hate to put something out there and have random people going, fail. And all the great innovators and inventors, they failed so many times. Like Igor Sikorsky, he reads a Jules Verne novel when he's a boy growing up in what's then the Russian Empire, and it describes a single rotor aircraft that can hover, and he gets in his head, I'm going to create what will become the helicopter. He tries it first in 1909. It crashes before it takes off. He tries it again. He comes to the United States after the Bolshevik Revolution, and he finally gets it to fly in 1939 after 30 years. He is not a failure. He is a great success. So I worry that people are that younger people are gun shy because. Yeah.
There's something to be said that you don't learn by success, you learn by failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we have to steal that hashtag back then. #fail as a point of honor.
Right.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting. You have people who have come to you you have such an eclectic career, right? So people come to you through the Henry Ford, through the I Love the 80s and the 90s, through the Daily Show, through, as I told you, I watched Wishbone with my kids.
I'm so glad you did.
And now a blog. You're eclectic nature.
But you know, no one has asked me about my cooking show.
Oh, that's right. And your cooking show.
Thank you. That's your cue.
That's your cue. Go ahead.
So I enjoy everything you do, but my husband and I really enjoyed my grandmother's ravioli.
Thank you.
And we often talk about which episode is our favorite, and I'm curious if you have an episode that sticks with you, and also what happened to that show. Is it ever?
Did you say you have a favorite episode, or you wanted to know?
We go back and forth about what our favorite is. Mine is the lesbian nurses. There was one,
they were great. Those women.
Which is that one?
Tearjerker.
So. My grandmother's ravioli was a show where I went around the country learning how to cook from grandmothers and grandfathers in their kitchens. And it really wasn't, I still don't know how to cook. And so it was really, I just wanted to hear their stories. I had found in my career that when people are doing an activity, especially if they're in a kitchen, they're more open. They're more at home. I wanted people specifically who didn't want to be on TV, because I have found in my career, regrettably, that people who aren't desperate to be on TV are better at being on TV than people who are. And I wanted the type of person, I remember there was an Irish grandmother, Peggy, who in the audition video, and usually the videos were neighbors or relatives that forced the grandparents on, and she was there with her golden retriever and going, what is a Morocco? Who is this? Why does he want to come to my kitchen? Cast, that's who we wanted. But I did it because I wanted to, my father had just died, and I think I wanted to talk to people at a stage in their lives where they had decided they knew, settled on, it had crystallized for them, what mattered, who had a kind of clarity. And I just thought it would be really fun, first and foremost. And I loved all the grandparents. We did 54 episodes, which the network thought was enough, but it was such a joyful experience. And I also learned that, and it's something I'd begun to learn on The Daily Show, that life isn't divided into half-hour sitcoms and hour-long dramas, that happy moments and sad moments are up against each other. So in one of the first episodes with Ruth Teig, who was a Holocaust survivor, who as a 6-year-old girl had spent a year hiding in a barn in Dubienka, Poland, and by the time she got out, she could barely walk. But that at one moment, we were both, I was, choking up hearing about her life. And in the next moment, we were making jokes about keeping kosher and Shabbat and what would happen if, if there were an eclipse in the middle of the day, would that change the rules or whatever? And so, and I loved this idea of just allowing something sad and then happy and then sad to be butt up against each other.
That's great. Thank you. One last question?
Yeah, we'll be taking one more question, and I just wanted to take a moment to remind you that we will be having a signing in the North Lobby. So if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, then we can set that up down there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought I wasn't going to get to ask.
It better be good.
Oh, it's not. So first of all, this isn't a speech, I promise. I have a 6-year-old, Eugene, and we live in Eugene, Oregon, and we named him that before we lived there. But we were at the library on Sunday, and he wanted to check out the encyclopedias. And so I hope that he is as inquisitive and curious as you are. But I wanted to ask, I'm a musical theater geek, and you mentioned Brigadoon earlier, and I guess I wanted to know if there was a musical that changed your life, or if there's a musical theater composer songwriting duo like Lerner and Lowe or Rodgers and Hart that made an impact with you.
Oh my gosh, what a great question. What a great question. Well, I love the songs of Rodgers and Hart, I think, because, I think that sometimes you're in a Rodgers and Hammerstein buoyant and optimistic mood, but then sometimes you're in a sardonic, reflective Rodgers and Hart mood, because his lyrics were always, there was something, they were more acerbic, and but a musical that really changed my life. Well, I became obsessed with the musical Cats when I was 14. And my parents, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and we took the Amtrak train to New York, and we saw the original cast of Cats. And my father had those, keys. I never understood, like janitor keys. Why did he have 30 keys on a ring? And when Betty Buckley was getting ready to sing the big note in memory, da-da-da-da, touch me, my father at that moment chose to put his hand in his pocket and go, argh, and it made that jangling noise. And then after that, I decided to write every cast of the musical Cats a fan letter. And then when I didn't hear back from them, I wrote a second round of letters asking, I would say, Dear Skimbleshanks, please ask McCavity to write me back. which is a really passive-aggressive way of saying, Skimbleshanks the railway cat, why didn't you write me back? And then I took a Time magazine cover, and I created a fake cover, which is in the news, by the way, but I created a fake cover with Betty Buckley, who played Grisabella, the hooker cat. That's really what she is. They call her the glamour cat. She's a prostitute cat. But anyway, I put her on the cover, and I remember on the family room floor, like I had like little letters all cut out in Elmer's glue, and I looked like a serial killer, right? Like, and my oldest brother walked in, he looked down at me, and this is the first time I heard this word. He went, "She's gonna think you're a stalker." Anyway, she probably did. I met her later, and she didn't remember the Time magazine cover that I'd so lovingly constructed for her. Wait, but the point of this story is cats and the letters. And then I got a Manhattan phone book. And this is when long distance cost money, and my mother wanted to kill me. But my best friend Mario and I got on different extensions. I was in the family room, he was in the kitchen, so we were on the phone, and I proceeded to go through to call all the members of the cast of Cats. And a Manhattan phone book has a lot of Buckleys, so that wasn't... But finally, Cynthia Onrubia, who played Victoria, the most boringly named cat. It's like not a great name for a cat, but she was really good in it. Her mother picked up the phone. Anyway, and as a 14-year-old, I was like, oh my God, you're the mother of someone in the cast of Cats. Can you tell me how I can be in the cast of Cats? I mean, I don't think my parents would have let me quit school, even if I do have a very high kick. Like, I can like, woo. So anyway, and I remember she was this real wonderful Filipino woman. And she said, "Oh, Cynthia was always going to dance." She explained to me like how I could like be like how I could train to be in the cast of Cats. And it was just really inspiring. And I later found out that this woman, Celie Onrubia, I think was her last name also, had been in Flower Drum Song, and she only died recently. But anyway, so I guess in a roundabout way, seeing cats changed my life.
All right. I thank you for that. Thank you for your questions. I would just say that, you know, as attested by this diverse audience, you bring a lot of pleasure in the world of media, and I thank you for it.
Thank you, Steve, very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Signing books downstairs. Thank you, folks.